Load-bearing walls are a funny concept. In architecture, you learn to identify them immediately. They're the spine of the building, the silent, heavy things that hold up the roof and keep the sky from crushing you. You can knock down a partition, change the wallpaper, or rip out the carpet, and the house remains standing. But if you compromise a load-bearing wall, the collapse isn't a question of if, but when. I spend my days staring at blueprints, calculating stress loads and shear forces for high-rise offices in downtown Seattle, ensuring that thousands of people remain safe without ever knowing the math that protects them. It is ironic, then, that I failed to notice the structural integrity of my own home was rotting away, not from the weight of the roof, but from the termites gnawing at the foundation. I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes before turning off the engine. The engine block ticked as it cooled, a metallic metronome counting down the seconds until I had to go inside. From the street, our house looked like the American Dream manifest. It was a two-story colonial with white siding that I power washed every spring, flanked by hydrangeas that my wife, Jessica, pruned with surgical precision. The lawn was a deep, impossible green. To a passerby, we were the Millers, the nice family at number 42. The successful architect, the devoted stay-at-home mother, and the adorable 7-year-old daughter. But they couldn't hear the silence. That was the thing about our house. It wasn't peaceful. It was quiet. Yes, but it was the quiet of a held breath, the kind of heavy, pressurized silence that exists right before a thunderstorm breaks. I finally killed the ignition and grabbed my briefcase. My hand lingered on the door handle. I used to run through the front door. I used to anticipate the sound of tiny feet thundering down the hallway and the squeal of Daddy that would greet me. That was over a year ago, before the park, before the change. Now, entering my home felt like walking into a museum where you are forbidden to touch the exhibits. When I opened the front door, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary hit me. It was a comforting scent, domestic and warm, completely at odds with the chill in the air. The entryway was spotless. Jessica was obsessive about order lately. A pair of muddy shoes would send her into a spiral of anxiety that took hours to soothe. "David, is that you?" Jessica's voice floated from the kitchen. It was light, airy, and pitched just a little too high. It was her performance voice. "I'm home," I called back, hanging my coat on the rack. I loosened my tie, feeling the fabric constrict my neck like a noose. I walked into the kitchen. Jessica was standing by the island, tossing a salad. She looked beautiful, I suppose. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a flawless chignon. Her makeup was intact, even at 6 in the evening. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were constantly scanning, checking the room, checking me, checking the corners for dust or discord. "How was work?" she asked, offering her cheek for a kiss. Her skin was cold. "Fine. The Anderson project is finally moving to the construction phase." I pulled back and looked around. "Where's Lily?" "She's in the dining room," Jessica said, her smile tightening just a fraction. "She's having a good day, David. Please, let's keep it calm tonight. No intense questions." Dr. Evans said she needs a low-pressure environment. I swallowed the sigh that wanted to escape my throat. Dr. Evans, the specialist we had been seeing for 6 months. He talked about trauma response, about selective mutism, about patience. I had been patient. I had been so patient that I felt like I was eroding. I walked into the dining room. Lily was sitting at her place, staring at her empty plate. She was small for her age, frail in a way she never used to be. Her dark hair, which used to be a wild mane, was braided tightly, matching her mother's need for control. She didn't look up when I entered. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders hunched forward as if she were trying to make herself disappear. "Hey, Ladybug," I said softly, crouching down beside her chair. She flinched. It was microscopic, a tiny tensing of the muscles in her neck, but I saw it. It felt like someone had driven an ice pick into my chest. My own daughter flinched at my voice. She slowly lifted her eyes. They were wide, dark pools of exhaustion. There was no spark, no recognition of joy. Just a flat, guarded wariness. I reached out and gently covered her small hand with mine. Her skin was clammy. She didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. She just let her hand lie there, limp and lifeless under mine. "Daddy missed you today," I whispered. She stared at me. Her lips parted slightly, and for a second, a heartbeat of hope, I thought she might make a sound. I thought I saw a flicker of something desperate in her gaze, a plea trying to break through the surface. "Dinner is ready," Jessica announced, breezing into the room with a steaming platter. The moment shattered. Lily snatched her hand away from mine and grabbed her fork, staring intensely at the tablecloth. I stood up, my knees cracking, and took my seat at the head of the table. We ate in a silence that was punctuated only by the scrape of silverware against china. It was a violent sound in the quiet room. Jessica filled the void. She talked about the weather, about a neighbor's new car, about the price of organic produce. She talked and talked, a wall of words designed to keep us from thinking. "Lily drew a picture today, didn't you, sweetie?" Jessica said, beaming at our silent daughter. Lily nodded mechanically, her eyes never leaving her peas. "It was a lovely picture of a flower," Jessica continued, pouring herself a second glass of wine. "I put on the fridge. She is so creative." I looked at Lily. "Can I see it later?" I asked. Lily didn't move. She didn't nod. She just took a bite of chicken and chewed slowly, rhythmically, like a machine programmed to eat. "She's tired," Jessica interjected quickly. "She didn't sleep well last night. Bad dreams again." I gripped my fork harder. "What kind of dreams?" Jessica waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, monsters, shadows, normal childhood stuff." I gave her some warm milk, and she went back to sleep. "You were out like a light, David. You didn't hear a thing." I looked at my wife. There was something brittle about her, something sharp and defensive. "I never heard a thing." That was the narrative. I was the heavy sleeper, the hard-working provider, the one who was too busy to notice the nightmares. But I wasn't sleeping well either. I lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering where my little girl had gone. The doctor said she stopped speaking because of a fright she got at the park when she got lost for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was all it took to steal her voice. It didn't make sense to me. It never had. But every time I pushed, Jessica would cry, accusing me of blaming her for losing sight of Lily that day. So I stopped pushing. I reinforced the load-bearing wall of our marriage with silence to keep it from collapsing. After dinner, the routine was as rigid as a military drill. Bath, pajamas, bed. I stood in the doorway of Lily's room. It was painted a soft lavender, filled with plush toys that she no longer played with. She climbed into bed and pulled the duvet up to her chin. "Good night, Lily," I said. "I love you more than anything." She looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. Then, she turned onto her side, facing the wall. I closed the door, leaving it open just a crack, the way she used to like it. When I turned around, Jessica was standing there, arms crossed. "You're staring at her again," she whispered harshly. "It makes her nervous, David. I'm her father, Jessica. I'm not staring. I'm looking for a sign that she's still in there." "She's in there," Jessica hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper so Lily wouldn't hear. "She is healing. Why can't you just accept that? Why do you always have to look for problems?" "I'm not looking for problems. I'm looking for my daughter." Jessica shook her head, a look of pity and annoyance on her face. "You're stressed. You're working too hard. Maybe you should go play golf this weekend. Relax a little." "I don't want to play golf," I said, walking past her toward our bedroom. "I want my family back." That night, the house settled into its uneasy slumber. I lay in bed, listening to Jessica's rhythmic breathing. She fell asleep instantly, which always baffled me. How could she sleep so soundly when the air in the house was so thick with tension? I got up around 2 in the morning and wandered downstairs. I walked through the dark living room, the moonlight casting long, distorted shadows across the carpet. I found myself in my home office, looking at the family photo on my desk. It was taken 2 years ago. We were at the beach. Lily was on my shoulders, her head thrown back in laughter, her mouth open in a shout of joy. I could almost hear the sound of it. A pure, uninhibited sound. Now, the only sound in the house was the hum of the refrigerator and the settling of the floorboards. I sat there for an hour, tracing the outline of her face in the photo. I had designed skyscrapers, museums, and libraries. I knew how to fix structural flaws, but I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to reach across the canyon of silence that had opened up in my own living room. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. The heavy clouds hung low over Seattle, threatening rain that wouldn't commit to falling. I woke up with a headache, a dull throb behind my eyes. Jessica was already up. I could hear the clatter of pans in the kitchen. When I came downstairs, the table was set for a feast. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, fruit. It was too much. It was always too much lately. "Good morning," Jessica chirped. She was wearing a floral sundress, looking entirely too cheerful for the gloomy weather. "Eat up. We need energy." "Energy for what?" I asked, pouring coffee. "Oh, just a day around the house. I thought we could organize the garage later." Lily was sitting at the table, picking at a pancake. She wore a long-sleeved shirt, even though the house was warm. She always wore long sleeves now. Jessica said she got cold easily. I sat down and drank my coffee black. The caffeine did little to clear the fog in my brain. I watched Lily. She was cutting her pancake into tiny, precise squares, arranging them in rows. It was an obsessive, repetitive motion. "Lily, do you want to help Daddy in the garden later?" I asked. "We can plant those bulbs we bought." She stopped cutting. Her hand hovered over the plate. She looked at her mother. A quick, darting glance. Jessica smiled. "Oh, honey, I don't think she wants to get dirty today." "Right, sweetie?" Lily looked back at her plate and resumed cutting. I slammed my mug down. Coffee splashed onto the table. "Stop answering for her, Jess. Just stop it." The room went dead silent. Jessica's eyes widened. She looked at Lily, then at me. "David," she said, her voice trembling. "You're scaring her." "I'm not scaring her. You are suffocating her. Let her speak. Let her choose not to speak. Just stop acting like you're her voice box. I'm her mother. I know what she needs. You're acting like her warden." Before the argument could escalate, the doorbell rang. It was a jarring, intrusive sound that cut through the tension like a knife. "Who is that?" I asked, irritated. We weren't expecting anyone. Jessica's face went pale for a second. Then she smoothed her expression into a mask of hospitality. "Oh, I forgot to mention. Bobby said he might drop by to drop off those insurance papers for the car." "Bobby? Robert Stevens?" I frowned. "Why is he coming here on a Saturday morning? Couldn't he email them?" "You know Bobby," Jessica said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "He's old school. He likes the personal touch. Be nice, David. Please." I gritted my teeth. Robert Stevens was a fixture in our social circle, mostly because he forced himself into it. He was an insurance broker who sold himself on charm, though I always found his charm to be oily and rehearsed. He was too loud, too familiar, and took up too much space in a room. I hadn't seen him in a few months, and I hadn't missed him. I heard the front door open and the booming voice that followed. "Knock, knock. Anyone home in the palace?" Jessica laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. "We're in the kitchen, Bobby." Bobby Stevens walked into the room. He was a big man, heavy-set but carrying it with an arrogance that mimicked muscle. He wore a polo shirt that was tied around the biceps and expensive loafers. He had a bottle of wine in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. "Davy, good to see you, man." He strode over and clapped me on the shoulder. His grip was too hard, a subtle assertion of dominance. "Robert," I said, not standing up. "A bit early for wine, isn't it?" He laughed, a guttural sound. "It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Just a little gift for the hostess." He handed the bottle to Jessica, his fingers lingering on hers for a fraction of a second too long. I saw it, or maybe I imagined it. Paranoia was becoming my default state. "You look great, Jess." "Stunning as always," Bobby said, winking at her. Jessica blushed. "Stop it, Bobby. You're terrible. Would you like some coffee?" "Love some." He pulled out a chair, my chair, the one at the head of the table opposite me, and sat down. He spread his legs wide, claiming the space. He looked at the spread of food. "Looks delicious." Mind if I steal a piece of bacon? Help yourself, Jessica said, pouring him a mug. I watched him eat. He chewed with his mouth slightly open. He was a slob masquerading as a gentleman. I wanted him out of my house. I wanted everyone out. I wanted to grab Lily and run away to a cabin in the woods where it was quiet and safe. So, how's the architecture game, Davy? Still building glass towers for the corporate overlords? Bobby asked, wiping grease from his lip. It's fine, I said shortly. And how was the little princess? Bobby turned his gaze to Lily. My stomach tightened. Lily had frozen. She was absolutely motionless. Her eyes were fixed on her plate, but I could see the tremors starting in her hands. The fork she was holding rattled against the china. She's fine, Bobby, Jessica said quickly, stepping between Bobby and Lily, placing the coffee down. She's just a little shy today. Shy? Bobby chuckled. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He was too close to her. Hey, kiddo, cat got your tongue? Lily dropped her fork. It clattered loudly. She pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor. She looked like a trapped animal. Her breathing was coming in short, shallow gasps. Leave her alone, Bob, I said, my voice low. I'm just saying hello. Bobby held up his hands in mock surrender, but there was a glint in his eyes. A cold, predatory amusement. He didn't look at me. He kept looking at Lily. He looked at her with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. Lily stood up. She was shaking so hard her knees knocked together. She looked at the door, then at me. It's okay, Lily, Jessica said, her voice straining. Uncle Bobby is just joking. Go get your doll. Honey, go upstairs. No, stay here, I said. Lily, come to Daddy. She didn't move. She was paralyzed. Bobby stood up. He loomed over the table. You know, Jess is right. She needs to toughen up a little. Can't be scared of her own shadow forever. He took a step toward Lily. That was the moment the world tilted. Hey, I shouted, standing up. I told you to back off. Bobby ignored me. He reached out a hand toward Lily, as if to pat her head or grab her shoulder. Just a friendly pat. That's what it would look like to a jury. That's what it would look like to a stranger. But to Lily, it was a threat of apocalyptic proportions. When his hand came within inches of her, Lily let out a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a gasp, a sucking in of air, so violent it sounded like she was drowning. She scrambled backward, tripping over her own feet, and fell hard onto the floor. She didn't cry out. She scrambled backward on her hands and heels, kicking at the air, her eyes rolling back in her head. What the hell did you do? I roared. I rounded the table in 2 strides and shoved Bobby. He stumbled back into the counter, looking surprised. I didn't touch her. She's crazy. Bobby yelled, his face flushing red. I dropped to my knees beside Lily. She was curled into a fetal ball, covering her head with her arms. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving as if her ribs were about to snap. Lily, it's okay, it's Daddy. I'm here. He's not going to touch you. I tried to touch her shoulder, but she flinched so violently she almost hit her head on the table leg. Jessica was there, hovering, wringing her hands. Oh my God, oh my God. Lily, stop it. Stop making a scene. Make a scene? I looked up at my wife with pure disbelief. She's terrified. Jessica, look at her. It's just a tantrum. Jessica shrieked. She's doing it for attention. And then the impossible happened. The room went quiet, save for Lily's ragged breathing. Slowly, painfully, Lily uncurled her arms. She pushed herself up into a sitting position. Her face was wet with tears, her nose was running, but her eyes were locked on Bobby. There was no more fear in them. There was something else, a terrifying, ancient clarity. She lifted a trembling hand and pointed a small finger directly at Robert Stevens. Her mouth opened. Her throat worked, fighting against a year of atrophy, fighting against the mental block that had silenced her. The sound that came out was raspy, cracked, like a rusty hinge forcing itself open. That's the man. We all froze. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Bobby's smug grin vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Lily took a breath, a deep, shuddering inhalation that seemed to draw strength from the very floorboards. She looked at me. For the first time in a year, she really looked at me. "Daddy," she croaked, her voice gaining strength, becoming the voice I remembered, but older, darker. "Daddy, Mama said if I talked, you would die." The silence that followed was heavier than any load-bearing wall. It was the silence of a structure collapsing. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and numb. I looked at Jessica. She wasn't looking at Lily. She was looking at Bobby. And in that glance, that split-second exchange of terror between them, I saw the entire architecture of their lie. Lily turned her finger back to Bobby. "He is the man who hurts me. When you go to work." The world stopped. The birds outside stopped singing. The refrigerator stopped humming. The only thing that existed was the pointing finger of my daughter and the truth that hung in the air like smoke. Bobby took a step back, raising his hands. "Now hold on, kid. You don't know what you're saying." I stood up. I didn't feel my legs moving. I didn't feel the floor beneath me. A cold, white rage, unlike anything I'd ever felt in my life, flooded my veins. It wasn't the hot anger of fight. It was the cold, calculating destruction of a demolition expert. I looked at Bobby. I looked at my wife. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the life I had built was gone. The house was condemned. And I was the one who was going to bring it down on top of them. "Get out," I whispered. Bobby laughed nervously. "Dave, come on, she's imagining things." "Get out," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, a primal roar that shook the windows. I stepped toward him, my hands balling into fists. I wasn't an architect anymore. I was a father who had just found the monster under the bed, and I was going to tear him apart. The echo of my own voice seemed to hang in the air, a physical thing that had sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Get out" is a simple command, 2 syllables, but when fueled by the realization that your entire reality is a construct of lies, it carries the weight of a demolition ball. Bobby Stevens did not move immediately. He stood by the kitchen island, his mouth slightly open, a piece of bacon still halfway to his lips. For a second, his arrogance held the line. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, the way one looks at a drunk person making a scene at a funeral. "Davy, settle down," he said, his voice dropping to a patronizing baritone. He actually took a step forward, raising his hands palms out. "You're scaring the kid. She's obviously confused. Kids say crazy things when they're stressed." I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body simply reacted to the threat in his proximity. I crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. I didn't punch him. I didn't want to bruise my knuckles on his jaw. Instead, I shoved him. I planted both hands on his chest and pushed with every ounce of leverage I had. Bobby stumbled back, his expensive loafers losing traction on the polished hardwood. He crashed into the granite countertop, the impact knocking the wind out of him with a sharp grunt. The bottle of wine he had brought wobbled and fell, shattering on the floor. Red liquid exploded across the white tiles like an arterial spray. Jessica screamed. It was a high, thin sound that grated on my nerves like a drill. "David, have you lost your mind?" She rushed to Bobby, not to me. She put her hands on his arms, steadying him. "Look what you did. You're out of control." I stood my ground, my chest heaving. My vision was tunneling, the edges of the room blurring into gray static. The only things in focus were the 2 strangers standing in my kitchen. "Get out of my house," I said again. My voice was lower now, colder. "If you're not out the door in 10 seconds, I will remove you, and I won't be gentle about it." Bobby straightened up, brushing Jessica's hands away. His face had changed. The mask of the jovial friend had slipped, revealing the sneer of a bully who realizes his victim is fighting back. "Fine," he spat, straightening his polo shirt. "I'm leaving. You're a psycho, Miller. You know that? No wonder your kid is messed up." He walked past me, deliberately bumping his shoulder into mine. I didn't flinch. I waited until I heard the front door slam, the sound reverberating through the frame of the house. Silence rushed back into the kitchen, but it wasn't peaceful. It was toxic. Jessica turned to me. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. She looked at the spilled wine, then at Lily, who was still on the floor, and finally at me. "How could you?" she whispered, trembling. "How could you embarrass us like that? He's a friend, David." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the woman I had married 10 years ago, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman who ironed my shirts and organized my birthday parties. And I saw a stranger, a complete and utter stranger who had been sleeping in my bed. "Stop talking," I said. "David, please listen to me." She started moving toward me, her hands reaching out in a pleading gesture. "Don't come near me," I warned. I backed away, putting the kitchen island between us. I turned to Lily. She hadn't moved. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the invisible wreckage of our family life. Her small finger was no longer pointing. Her hands were in her lap, clenched into tight fists. She was watching me, waiting to see if the monster was gone or if a new one had taken his place. "Lily," I said, forcing my voice to be steady, "I need you to go upstairs and pack your backpack. Put your favorite pajamas in there. And your toothbrush. Can you do that for me?" She nodded once, a sharp, jerky movement, and scrambled to her feet. She ran out of the room without looking at her mother. Jessica watched her go, then turned her fury back on me. "Where do you think you're taking her?" "You can't take her." "Watch me," I said. I walked past her toward the hallway. "This is kidnapping," she shrieked, following me. "I'll call the police." "Go ahead," I said, stopping at the foot of the stairs and whirling around to face her. "Call them. Dial 911 right now. Tell them your husband is taking his daughter to a hotel because she just identified your lover as her abuser. Tell them that." "Jessica, I would love to see the police report." She froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The threat hung in the air, tangible and sharp. She knew. She knew exactly what Lily had said, and she knew that if the authorities got involved, the questions wouldn't stop at a domestic dispute. I ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of adrenaline and fear. I felt like I was in a burning building, trying to salvage the only thing that mattered before the roof collapsed. I burst into Lily's room. She was shoving clothes into her pink backpack with frantic efficiency. A pair of socks, a t-shirt, a small stuffed bear. She wasn't crying. That scared me more than tears would have. She was operating on survival instinct. I went to our bedroom, the master suite that I had designed with a walk-in closet and a view of the garden. It felt like walking into a crime scene. I grabbed a duffel bag from the shelf and threw in a few changes of clothes for myself. I didn't care what I grabbed. I swept my toiletries into the bag with one arm. Jessica appeared in the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, sobbing now. The anger had morphed into manipulation. "David, please don't do this. We can talk about it. She's just a child. She has an active imagination. You know how she gets with her stories." "Stories?" I zipped the bag shut with a vicious yank. "She hasn't spoken a word in 12 months, Jessica. 12 months. And the first thing she says is that he hurts her. That you told her I would die if she spoke. Is that a story?" She misunderstood. Jessica wailed. I told her you were stressed. That if we bothered you, you might get sick. That's all." I brushed past her, the duffel bag slung over my shoulder. "I don't believe you." I walked into Lily's room. She was ready. She had her backpack on, the straps pulled tight. She was holding her favorite blanket, the one with the satin edges she used to rub against her cheek when she was a baby. "Let's go, Bug," I said, holding out my hand. She took it. Her hand was small and cold, but she gripped my fingers with a strength that surprised me. We walked down the hallway, past the family photos on the wall, lies framed in mahogany, and down the stairs. Jessica was at the bottom, blocking the front door. She had wiped her eyes, her face hardening again. "You're not taking my daughter," she said. "Move, Jessica." "No." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me worry for a year, watched me pay thousands of dollars to doctors, watched me lose sleep, all while she knew exactly why our daughter was silent. "If you don't move," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I will walk right through you. And I will never look back." Something in my eyes must have convinced her. She saw that the load-bearing wall had indeed collapsed, and there was nothing left to support the roof. She stepped aside. We walked out into the gray, overcast day. The air was cool and damp. I unlocked the car, buckled Lily into the back seat, and threw our bags in the trunk. I didn't look at the house as I reversed out of the driveway. I didn't look at the window where I knew Jessica was watching. I just drove. I drove for 20 minutes without a destination in mind. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, half expecting to see Bobby's truck or a police car. But the road behind us was empty. "Where are we going, Daddy?" The voice came from the back seat. It was small, hesitant, but it was there. I almost swerved off the road. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the asphalt. "We're going to a hotel?" "Honey," I said, clearing my throat. "A nice one, with a pool. And room service. Just you and me. Is he coming?" "No." I met her eyes in the mirror. "No, Lily. He is never coming near you again. I promise." We checked into the Marriott downtown. It was anonymous, corporate, and secure. I paid cash for the room, a habit from watching too many thriller movies, perhaps, or maybe just a primal need to be untraceable for a night. The room was on the 14th floor. It smelled of industrial cleaner and starch. It had 2 queen beds and a generic abstract painting on the wall. To me, it was the most beautiful place on earth because it was safe. I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt and the security latch. I closed the heavy blackout curtains, shutting out the city. Lily sat on one of the beds, her legs dangling off the edge. She looked small in the vastness of the room. "Are you hungry?" I asked. "We can order anything you want. Burgers? Pizza? Ice cream for dinner?" She shook her head. "Can I watch TV?" "Of course." I turned on the television to a cartoon channel. The bright colors and manic energy of the animation filled the room, providing a buffer of noise. I sat in the armchair in the corner and watched her. She sat cross-legged, staring at the screen, but I knew she wasn't really watching. She was decompressing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. 5 missed calls from Jessica. 3 text messages. "David, please pick up. I am worried sick. You're making a huge mistake. If you don't come back tonight, I'm calling a lawyer." I blocked her number. It felt petty, childish even, but I couldn't handle her voice right now. Then another message came through. An unknown number. "Davy, be reasonable. Nobody wants this to get messy. Think about your reputation. Think about the firm. Let's meet for a drink and talk this out like men." Bobby. I felt the bile rise in my throat. The audacity of the man was staggering. He thought this was a misunderstanding. He thought this was something that could be smoothed over with a handshake and a beer. He thought he could ensure his way out of this. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the message and saved it. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. "Daddy?" I looked up. Lily had turned off the TV. The room was silent again. "Yes, sweetie? Why did Mama say you would die?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I moved from the chair to the edge of her bed. I sat down, careful not to crowd her. "Mama." "Mama was wrong, Lily. I'm not going to die. I'm right here." She picked at the loose thread on the duvet cover. She said if I told the secret, the bad men would come and take you away, where you would get sick and your heart would stop. She said I had to be a good girl and be quiet. I reached out and took her hand. "Lily, look at me." She looked up. Her eyes were dry now, age beyond her 7 years. "That was a lie," I said firmly. It was a very bad lie. Sometimes adults do bad things to protect themselves. They told you that because they didn't want to get in trouble, not because I was in danger. She nodded slowly, processing this. "He hurt me, Daddy." "I know, baby. I know." I had to ask, even though it tore me apart. "How'd he hurt you?" She pulled her sleeve up. There were no marks there now, but she rubbed the skin of her forearm as if remembering a phantom pain. "He used to pinch me, really hard, like a crab, on my arms and my legs where the shorts cover, and he would lock me in the pantry. The pantry, the small, windowless closet off the kitchen where we kept the dry goods." "Why the pantry?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because I wanted to watch TV in the living room, but he and Mama wanted to play on the sofa. They said I was in the way, so he put me in the pantry and turned off the light. He said if I made a sound, the rats would come." "Rats?" "We didn't have rats." But a 7-year-old doesn't know that. I pulled her into a hug. I wrapped my arms around her small frame and squeezed, trying to transfer every ounce of my strength into her, trying to absorb her fear into my own body. I buried my face in her hair, smelling the strawberry shampoo that Jessica bought. "I am so sorry, Lily," I whispered. "I am so sorry I didn't know." "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered back, her small hand patting my back. "You know now." We ordered room service, grilled cheese, and tomato soup, comfort food. We ate on the bed, watching a movie about a lost fish finding his way home. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her head resting on my lap. I stayed like that for hours, afraid to move, afraid to wake her. Around midnight, I carefully shifted her to the pillows and pulled the covers up. I walked to the window and peeked through the curtains. The city of Seattle was a grid of lights below, indifferent to my shattering world. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a racing engine, revving high but going nowhere. I needed to understand. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I walked over to Lily's backpack, which was sitting on a desk. I wanted to make sure she had clothes for the morning. I opened the main compartment. Inside, crumpled at the bottom, beneath the socks and the stuffed bear, was a sketchbook. I pulled it out. It was a standard spiral-bound notebook. I sat at the desk and turned on the small lamp. The first few pages were normal drawings. Flowers, suns, stick figures of a family holding hands. Then, about halfway through, the style changed. The lines became jagged, heavy. The colors shifted from yellow and blue to black and red. One drawing showed a large black figure looming over a small bed. The figure had no face, just a gaping mouth. Another showed a stick figure labeled Daddy standing outside a house. The house had bars on the windows. Daddy had a blindfold on. I turned the page. This one was more detailed. It showed the kitchen. There was a table and two figures sitting close together. One had long blonde hair. The other was big and round. In a corner of the room, there was a small black square. A door. And inside the square, two eyes looking out. The caption, written in shaky block letters, read, "The Quiet Place." I closed the book. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just trauma. This was documentation. My daughter had been documenting her imprisonment in crayons while I was designing lobbies for law firms. I needed more. I needed concrete proof. The drawings were powerful, but in a court of law, against a charming mother and a manipulative sociopath, they could be dismissed as fantasy. I needed something they couldn't explain away. I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank accounts. I saw the transactions I had missed in my trusting blindness. Withdrawals from the joint savings. Consulting fees paid to a company I didn't recognize. I Googled the company name. It was a Shell LLC registered to an address that turned out to be a P.O. box in a strip mall. But financial infidelity was the least of my problems. I needed to prove the abuse. I needed to prove the conspiracy. I stared at the laptop screen, the blue light illuminating the darkened hotel room. I thought about the house. My smart home. I had installed the system myself 2 years ago. It controlled the lights, the locks, the thermostat. The thermostat. We had the Ecobee system. High-end sensors in every room to detect occupancy so it wouldn't heat empty spaces. I remembered a feature I had disabled on the main app because it was annoying, the voice command integration. But the sensors had a security buffer. They didn't record video, but they were designed to detect glass breaking or alarms. And they had a diagnostic mode for developers. I was an architect, but I worked closely with engineers. I knew how these systems worked. The raw data logs. They sometimes cached audio snippets to improve voice recognition algorithms, storing them locally on the hub before uploading or deleting them. I logged into manufacturer's portal using my developer credentials. I accessed the hub in my house remotely. The connection was slow. The little spinning wheel on the screen mocked me. Connecting to 42 Evergreen Terrace. Status online. I navigated to the sensor logs. Kitchen, living room, master bedroom. There were hundreds of files. Most were just metadata, temperature, humidity, motion detected. But there were audio flags. Trigger event, loud noise. Trigger event. Voice command unclear. I filter by kitchen and Saturday. There was a file from 3 months ago. Timestamp, 2:15 p.m. Saturday. I was at a conference in Portland that weekend. I put on my headphones. I didn't want Lily to wake up and hear the ghosts. I clicked play. Static. Then the sound of a chair scraping. Don't worry about him, babe. He's clueless. That was Bobby's voice. Clear as a bell. I know, but he's been asking why the savings account is dipping. Jessica's voice. She sounded annoyed, not fearful. We need to be careful. Careful is boring. Besides, you said the kitchen remodel would cover the transfers. Just tell him the contractor needed a deposit. I did. He bought it. He trusts me. A pause. Then a giggle. God, he's so boring, Bobby. He just comes home, eats, and stares at the wall. That's why you have me. To spice things up. A sound of movement. Then a thump. Where's the brat? In the closet. I gave her the iPad, but I took the charger. She'll be quiet. I told her the policeman is coming for dinner. Laughter. Both of them laughed. It was a cruel, wet sound. You're wicked, Jess. I love it. Just a few more months, Jessica said. Her voice was closer to the microphone now, breathless. We get the bonus from his firm at Christmas. We finish the remodel, and then I file. Irreconcilable differences. I take the house, half the pension, and child support. And we are free. And the mute kid? She's damaged goods, Bobby. Maybe we can send her to a boarding school. Or maybe David will fight for custody. If he wants her, he can have her. She creeps me out anyway, staring all the time. The recording ended. I sat there in the dark, the headphones pressing against my ears. I felt cold, freezing cold. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a heist, a calculated, methodical dismantling of my life and my daughter's psyche for profit. They had turned my daughter into a prisoner and me into a piggy bank. They had laughed about it in my kitchen while eating my food. I took the headphones off and laid them gently on the desk. I looked at Lily, sleeping soundly, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm of peace she hadn't known in a year. The sadness evaporated. The grief vanished. What remained was something harder, something sharper. It was the cold precision of a blueprint. I downloaded the file. I downloaded every file I could find. I backed them up to the cloud, to a USB drive, to my phone. I made 3 copies. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the city again. You wanted a war, Jessica? I thought, staring at the reflection of my own eyes in the glass. You wanted to destroy the foundation and walk away with the materials? I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the most aggressive divorce attorney in Seattle. It was 3 a.m. I didn't care. I left a voicemail. My name is David Miller. I have audio evidence of child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and adultery. I want to destroy them. I don't want a settlement. I want a scorching earth. Call me. I sat back in a chair and watched the sun come up. For the first time in a year, I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I had a project, and I was going to execute it with flawless precision. The walls were coming down, but this time I controlled the demolition charges. Controlled demolition is an art form that is often misunderstood. People see the dust and the collapse, the spectacular implosion of steel and concrete, and they assume it is an act of chaos. It is not. It is the most precise form of engineering there is. You do not simply blow up a building. You identify the structural weak points, the critical joints where the tension is highest, and you place your charges with the delicacy of a surgeon. If you do it right, the building does not explode outward, damaging the neighbors. It folds in on itself, retreating into its own footprint, burying its history under a neat pile of rubble. I woke up on Sunday morning with the clarity of a demolition expert surveying a condemned site. The panic of the previous day had calcified into a cold, hard resolve. The hotel room was bright, the sun filtering through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Lily was still asleep, curled into a ball, clutching her teddy bear. I watched her for a moment, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. She was the only thing I was going to pull out of the rubble intact. Everything else, the marriage, the house, the reputation, the shared history, was going to be leveled. I had already made the first move. At 4 a.m., I had sent the email to Arthur Vance. Vance was not a nice man. In the world of Seattle family law, he was known as the Shredder. He was expensive, aggressive, and entirely devoid of the soft touch that family courts usually encouraged. I didn't want a mediator. I wanted a weapon. His reply had come at 6:30 a.m. My office. Sunday at 10. Bring everything. I ordered breakfast for Lily, pancakes with extra syrup, her favorite. When she woke up, she was quiet, her eyes scanning the room to ensure we were still in the safety of the hotel. "Daddy?" She whispered. "We're safe, Bug," I said, handing her a glass of orange juice. "We have a busy day today. We're going to meet a man who helps people fix big problems." "Is he a policeman?" she asked, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "No," I assured her. "He's a lawyer. He fights with words and paper. And he's on our team." I dressed in my best suit. It was a charcoal gray three-piece I usually reserve for presenting bids to city councils. Today, I was presenting the bid for my life. I packed the laptop, the hard drive with the backups, and the sketchbook. We took a cab to Vance's office in a glass tower overlooking the Sound. The city looked peaceful, people walking dogs and drinking coffee, completely unaware that a man was walking among them with a nuclear device in his briefcase. Arthur Vance's office was a study in intimidation. Dark mahogany, leather chairs that swallowed you whole, and a view that cost more than my annual salary. Vance himself was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a suit that cost more than my car. He didn't smile when we entered. He shook my hand firmly and nodded at Lily. "My paralegal, Mrs. Higgins, is in the next room," Vance said, his voice dry and precise. "She has Disney Plus and a jar of cookies. The little lady will be more comfortable there." I looked at Lily. "Go with Mrs. Higgins, honey. I'll be right here. The door will be open." Once Lily was settled, Vance closed the heavy oak door and sat behind his desk. He didn't offer me coffee. He pointed to the laptop. "Show me," he said. I played the recording, the one from the kitchen, the one where they laughed about the mute brat and the remodel. Vance listened. He didn't react. He stared at a spot on the wall, his face a mask of concentration. When the recording ended, he steepled his fingers. "Is it the only one?" "I have 6 more," I said, "plus bank records showing unauthorized transfers to a shell company, and a sketchbook where my daughter documented the abuse." Vance nodded slowly. He leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw a glint of something sharp in his eyes. "Mr. Miller, usually when men come to me, they are on the defensive. They are trying to hide assets or dodge alimony. You have handed me a loaded gun. What are my chances?" I asked. "In a normal divorce? 50-50. Washington is a no-fault state. But this isn't a divorce. This is a criminal conspiracy." Vance opened a legal pad and picked up a fountain pen. "However, the courts are slow. If we file today, you won't get a hearing for weeks. In that time, your wife, and let's be clear, she is the primary antagonist here, will try to spin the narrative. She will claim you kidnapped the child. She will claim you are unstable. She already has," I said. "She's telling people I'm having a breakdown." Vance smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "Good. Let her talk. Let her dig the hole deeper. We aren't going to argue with her. We're going to evict her. But first, we need to secure the perimeter." He outlined the strategy. It was brutal and efficient. We would file for an emergency protective order based on the audio evidence of child endangerment. We would freeze all assets. And we would file a civil suit against Robert Stevens for intentional infliction of emotional distress and fraud. "I want him heard," I said, my voice steady. "Not physically. I want his life dismantled. He used my client data. He used my home." Vance looked up from his notes. "He used your client data? From your firm?" "Yes. I found emails. He was prospecting my client list for insurance leads while I was at work." Vance actually chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Oh, that is beautiful. That is a violation of about 5 different privacy laws and professional ethics codes. Mr. Miller, we're going to have fun." We spent 2 hours finalizing the paperwork. When I left his office, I didn't feel lighter. I felt heavier but it was the good kind of weight. The weight of ammunition. My next stop was the house. I had checked the tracking app on our family plan. Jessica's phone was pinging from a location 10 miles away, a brunch spot she frequented with her friends. She was likely there right now, crying into a mimosa, telling her circle of vultures how her crazy husband had snatched her baby. She felt safe. She thought I was hiding in a hole somewhere. She was wrong. I dropped Lily off with my sister, Sarah, who lived in a suburb on the other side of the city. Sarah had cried when I told her the basics, promising to guard the door with a baseball bat if necessary. I drove back to the house. My house, pulling into the driveway, felt surreal. The house looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but the spirit of it was dead. I unlocked the front door and disarmed the alarm using the code only I knew, the administrator override I'd set up years ago. The house was silent. The air was stale. The shattered wine bottle from yesterday had been cleaned up, but a faint purple stain remained on the grout. A scar. I didn't have much time. I went straight to the home office. I needed the physical files. The backups were good, but original documents were better. I emptied the filing cabinet into a box. Tax returns, deeds, insurance policies. Then I went to the master bedroom. The bed was unmade. It smelled of her perfume and something else, a must that made my stomach turn. I went to her closet. Jessica wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was just arrogant. She thought I was too stupid to look. I found a shoebox on the top shelf, behind her collection of designer handbags. Inside were the receipts she thought she had hidden. Not just for dinners. Receipts for a hotel in Portland. Receipts for a men's watch worth $5,000. Receipts for a consultation with a divorce lawyer dated 6 months ago. She had been planning this for half a year. While I was worrying about Lily's speech therapy, she was planning her exit strategy using my money. I took the box. I took her jewelry, the pieces I bought her for anniversaries. Legally, they were marital assets. Practically, I wasn't going to let her sell them to fund her defense. As I was walking down the stairs, I saw the flashing light on the landline phone. I pressed play. Jessica, it's Bobby. Call me back. He's blocked my number. I need to know if he's contacted the bank. We need to move the funds from the joint account today. Call me. I deleted the message. I walked into the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, looking at the spot where Lily had fallen, where she had pointed her finger and broken the spell. I felt a surge of grief, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. This was supposed to be our sanctuary. I took a deep breath. Then, I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. Vance had given me the green light. Scorched earth. I tapped the screen. I transferred the entire balance of our joint savings account, $80,000 meant for the renovation and Lily's college fund, into a new, secure trust account under my name solely, flagged as disputed marital assets per Vance's instruction. It was legal as long as I accounted for it in the divorce. But for Jessica, it would be a catastrophe. Then I went to the credit cards. I reported the joint cards as compromised and requested an immediate freeze. Immediate punch. I imagined the waiter bringing the bill. I imagined her handing over the platinum card with a tearful, tragic smile. And I imagined the waiter coming back, whispering that the card was declined. It was a petty thought, but after what she did to my daughter, petty was all I had left to keep me sane. I left the house, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. The next stop was the one I had been dreading and craving in equal measure. The Stevens Insurance Group was located in a mid-sized office park near the highway. It was a reputable firm, or at least it tried to be. Robert Stevens was a senior broker there. He had a corner office and a plaque on the wall. I checked my watch. It was 1 p.m. I knew Bobby's schedule. He would be coming back from lunch, likely a liquid one, feeling invincible. I didn't go to Bobby's office. I went to the top floor, to the CEO's suite. Arthur Sterling was a man of the old school. He was 70, built like a linebacker who had gone to seed, with a reputation for absolute integrity. He had built the company from nothing. He knew me because my firm had designed their headquarters 5 years ago. We had a professional respect for one another. His secretary looked up, surprised as I walked in. Mr. Miller, do you have an appointment? No, Brenda. But Mr. Sterling will want to see me. Tell him it concerns a massive breach of client confidentiality and potential corporate fraud within his firm. Her eyes widened. She picked up the phone immediately. 2 minutes later, I was sitting in Sterling's office. He looked older than I remembered. He offered me water, which I declined. "David," he said, his voice gravelly, "you look like you've been through a war. What is this about fraud?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I placed a manila folder on his desk. "Robert Stevens has been using your company database to mine personal information on high-net-worth clients for his own extracurricular activities. Specifically, he has been targeting the wives of your clients, engaging in affairs, and using the financial data he accesses to help them siphon money before filing for divorce." Sterling stared at me. "That is a hell of an accusation, son." I opened the folder. Here are the logs. He accessed my file 30 times in the last month. Not to update my policy, but to check my liquidity. Here are the emails he sent from his work account, stupidly, to my wife, discussing how to hide assets. And here, I pointed to the last document, is a copy of the police report I am filing later today for child endangerment and harassment. Sterling picked up the papers. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly. He read in silence. His face turned a dangerous shade of red. He looked up at me. "You're telling me he used my firm, my reputation, to destroy your family? He's a predator, Arthur, and he's doing it on your clock, using your resources. If this gets out, if the other clients find out he's been reading their financials to hunt for vulnerabilities," the implication hung in the air. It would be the end of the firm. Sterling closed the folder. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. And then, the sadness was replaced by the cold, hard look of a man who cuts out cancer. "He's downstairs?" Sterling asked. "He just walked in," I said. "I saw his car." Sterling pressed the intercom button. "Send Robert Stevens up here. Now." I stood up. "I should go." "No," Sterling said. "Sit down, David. You deserve to see this." I hesitated, then sat. I moved my chair to the corner, slightly in the shadows. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Bobby walked in. He looked flushed, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was smiling, that same oily, confident smile. "Mr. Sterling, to what do I owe the honor?" "I was just closing the Johnson account." He stopped. He saw me. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a special effect. His smile faltered, twitched, and died. "What's he doing here?" Bobby asked, his voice tight. "Sit down, Robert," Sterling said. Bobby didn't sit. He looked at me, his eyes darting to the folder on the desk. "Dave, look, whatever you told him, this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with work." "It has everything to do with work," Sterling said, his voice low and dangerous. He stood up. "You accessed the Miller file. You accessed the Kensington file. You accessed the Roth file." "Why?" Bobby stammered. I was cross-selling, looking for opportunities to sleep with their wives?" Sterling cut him off. "To help them embezzle funds?" Bobby flinched. "That's slander. I'll sue." Sterling threw the folder at him. The papers scattered across the floor. "Sue me? You moron. You use your work email. You use the company server. We have IT logs of everything. Every dirty text, every plan to hide assets. You are fired. Effective immediately." Bobby looked at the papers on the floor. He looked at me. His hands curled into fists. "You did this," he hissed at me. "You ruined my life." I stood up slowly. I walked over to him until I was inches from his face. I smelled the alcohol on his breath. "I didn't ruin your life, Bobby. I just turned on the lights. You're the roach that got caught." Sterling pressed the intercom again. "Security to my office. Escort Mr. Stevens out. He is not to touch his computer. Pack his personal effects in a box and leave it at the curb." Bobby looked at Sterling, realizing there was no negotiation here. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with a pure, impotent hate. "This isn't over, Miller," he whispered. "It hasn't even started," I said. Security arrived, 2 large men in uniforms. They took Bobby by the arms. He didn't fight. He slumped, the air going out of him. As they dragged him out, he looked smaller, pathetic. The monster from the pantry was just a loser in a cheap suit. Sterling looked at me. "I am sorry, David." I truly am. I have my suspicions. He was always too slick. But I never imagined. Thank you, Arthur, I said. I walked out of the building. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows. I felt a strange vibration in my pocket. My phone. I got into my car and looked at the screen. It was Jessica. Block call log showed 20 attempts. Then, a new number. I answered. Hello, you son of a. It was Bobby. He must have borrowed a phone or used a burner. His voice was shaking with rage. You think you're smart? You think you won? You just declared war, Davy. You have no idea what I can do. I know people. I listened to his threats. They sounded hollow now. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the dashboard as I started the engine. Are you done? I asked calmly. I'm going to bury you. He screamed. Bobby, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I just froze your girlfriend's assets. I just got you fired for cause, which means no severance and no unemployment. I have a restraining order being signed by a judge within the hour that says if you come within 500 feet of my daughter, you go to jail. And my lawyer is currently drafting a civil suit that will take every penny you have left and every penny you ever make in the future. There was silence on the other end. Heavy, breathing silence. You built your house on sand. Bobby, I said, shifting the car into drive. And the tide just came in. I hung up. I drove toward my sister's house to pick up Lily. I was exhausted. My bones ached. But the load-bearing wall of my fear was gone. I was the architect now, and I had a lot of rubble to clear before I could start rebuilding. But as I merged onto the highway, a thought struck me. Jessica. I had dealt with Bobby. I had dealt with the money. But Jessica, she was the mother. And the courts, as Vance had warned, had a blind spot when it came to mothers. She wouldn't give up. She was desperate now, and a desperate narcissist is the most dangerous thing in the world. I needed to make sure that when she tried to strike back, she hit nothing but air. I dialed Vance's number. Yeah? The lawyer answered on the first ring. It's done, I said. Bobby is out. Good. I have the judge on the line for the emergency order. But David? Yes. Prepare yourself. Your wife just called the police. She's reporting a kidnapping. Let her, I said, watching the skyline of Seattle pass by. I have the sketchbook. I have the audio. And I have the truth. Let them come. I hung up and pressed the accelerator. I wasn't running anymore. I was racing to get to my daughter before the police did, to show them the evidence before the narrative could spin out of control. The demolition was underway. Now came the cleanup. As I drove, I replayed Lily's voice in my head. That's the man who hurts me. That sentence was my fuel. It was a steel beam in my spine. I would burn the whole city down if I had to, just to make sure he never cast a shadow over her again. But first, I had to survive the night, because the police were looking for a kidnapper, and I was driving the getaway car. I pulled off the highway, taking the back roads to Sarah's house. Strategy. Always strategy. If they were tracking my car, I needed to be unpredictable. I was an architect. I knew how to build. But today, I learned I also knew how to fight in the ruins. And I was just getting started. Blue and red lights have a specific strobe effect that disorients the brain. They bounce off suburban siding and manicured hedges, turning a quiet cul-de-sac into a scene of chaotic urgency. When I turned the corner onto my sister Sarah's street, the kaleidoscope of colors washed over my windshield, pulsating in a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. A police cruiser was parked at a sharp angle in front of Sarah's driveway. Its radio was squawking, a mechanical static that cut through the evening air. I didn't panic. Panic is a structural failure. It is the moment the beams buckle under stress. I was past panic. I was in a phase of cold, calculated load management. I pulled my car to the curb, killed the engine, and took a deep breath. The air inside the car felt recycled, thick with the residue of my own anxiety. I checked the passenger seat, the folder, the laptop, the evidence, my shield and my sword. I stepped out of the car. The night was crisp, the kind of suburban quiet that usually masks the rot behind closed doors. An officer was standing on Sarah's porch. Sarah was there, too, blocking the doorway with her arms crossed, looking like a badger defending its burrow. She was shouting something, her voice shrill with indignation. I walked up the driveway, my hands visible, my movements slow and deliberate. "Officer," I called out. My voice was steady, projecting the authority of a man who knows he is right. "I am David Miller. I believe you are looking for me." The officer turned. He was young, thick-necked, with a buzz cut and a look of annoyance etched into his features. He rested his hand near his belt, not on his holster, but close enough to signal dominance. "Mr. Miller?" he asked, stepping down from the porch. "We have a report of a custodial interference. Your wife claims you took your daughter without consent and have fled the marital home." I didn't stop walking until I was 5 feet from him. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see a threat. I saw a bureaucratic obstacle that needed to be navigated. "That is a mischaracterization, officer," I said calmly. "I am a father. I have full parental rights. There is no custody agreement in place because we are not yet divorced. Therefore, I cannot kidnap my own child." The officer frowned, checking his notebook. "She claims the child is in danger. She claims you are mentally unstable." I reached into my jacket pocket, slowly, and pulled out the thick envelope Vance had prepared for exactly this moment. "Officer, inside this envelope is a copy of an emergency motion for a protective order filed 2 hours ago with the King County Superior Court. It outlines credible evidence of psychological abuse and child endangerment committed by the mother and her associate. It also contains a sworn affidavit from my attorney. My daughter is inside this house, safe, fed, and sleeping. The only danger she faces is returning to the environment I just removed her from." The officer hesitated. He took the envelope and opened it. He shined his flashlight on the documents, scanning the legal jargon. He saw the letterhead of Vance and Associates. He saw the stamps. He saw the weight of the law shifting from Jessica's frantic phone call to my documented reality. He looked at Sarah, then back at me. "Is the child distressed?" "She is sleeping, officer," Sarah snapped from the porch. "She ate pancakes and watched a movie. The only distress she felt was when her mother called the house, screaming." The officer sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. He handed the envelope back to me. "Look, Mr. Miller, this is a civil matter. If there's no court order prohibiting you from having the child, and she's safe, I can't arrest you. But you need to resolve this. We can't have squad cars out here every time you two have spat." "This isn't a spat," I said, my voice dropping to a low chill. "It's a rescue operation." The officer nodded, touched the brim of his cap, and walked back to his cruiser. As the blue and red lights finally died, fading into the darkness, I felt a tremor run through my hands. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline crash. I walked up the steps and hugged my sister. She smelled of laundry detergent and loyalty. "You okay?" she whispered. "I'm still standing," I said. "Is she asleep?" "I like a light." I didn't stay long. I couldn't. I was radioactive. If I stayed, Jessica would send more police, or worse, she would come herself. I needed to draw the fire away from Lily. I kissed my sleeping daughter on the forehead, whispered a promise she couldn't hear, and went back to the hotel. But the war wasn't staying in the shadows. It was spilling out onto the screens. Back in the hotel room, I opened my laptop. I logged into social media, a place I usually avoided. My feed was a disaster zone. Jessica had gone nuclear. There was a photo of Lily, looking angelic in a white dress, posted 3 hours ago. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Please help. My husband has suffered a breakdown and taken our baby. He is confused and aggressive. If you see him, please contact the police. We just want our home safe. Hashtag missing child, hashtag pray for Lily." It had hundreds of shares. The comments were a torrent of misplaced sympathy and vitriol directed at me. "Oh my God, Jess, I'm so sorry. I always thought he was a bit quiet. It's always the quiet ones. If I see him, I'll drag him to the station myself." Then I saw the masterstroke. A comment from Robert Stevens. "We are all here for you, Jess. We will find her. Stay strong." The audacity was breathtaking. The man who had terrorized my daughter in a pantry was now publicly performing the role of a concerned family friend. It made my blood run hot, a simmering fury that threatened to boil over. But I forced it down. Anger is energy. Uncontrolled, it burns you. Controlled, it fuels the engine. My phone buzzed. It was my mother-in-law, Martha. David, we are all at the house. Bring Lily back. We need to talk. Now, don't make this worse. I stared at the screen. This was the trap. They wanted an intervention. They wanted to corner me, gang up on me, and shame me into submission. They thought they were dealing with the old David, the passive architect who just wanted everyone to get along. They were wrong. I texted back. I will come. Alone. Lily stays where she is. 9 p.m. Have Frank and Martha there. And tell Jessica, if she screams, I leave. I spent the next hour preparing. I wasn't going to a family meeting. I was under trial. I organized the audio files on my laptop. I connected a portable Bluetooth speaker to ensure the sound would fill the room. I reviewed the bank statements, highlighting the transfers in yellow. I was building a case, brick by brick. I drove to my in-laws' house. It was a large, imposing estate in a wealthy neighborhood, the kind of place where appearances were the only currency that mattered. Frank Henderson was a retired colonel, a man who believed in chain of command and discipline. Martha was a socialite who believed in maintaining the facade of perfection at all costs. They had always tolerated me, thinking I was a bit too soft for their daughter, but they respected my income. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Bobby's truck parked next to Jessica's SUV. Of course, he was there to control the narrative. He was there to intimidate me. I walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used the key they had given me years ago for emergencies. This was an emergency. The living room was staged like a tribunal. Frank sat in his leather armchair, stiff as a board. Martha was on the sofa, clutching a handkerchief. Jessica was curled up next to her, looking small and fragile, her eyes red-rimmed. And standing behind the sofa, hand resting protectively on the backrest, was Bobby. The conversation stopped when I entered. For pairs of eyes locked onto me. The air was thick with judgment. Where's my granddaughter? Frank barked, his voice booming. Safe, I said, closing the door behind me. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room, keeping my distance. You look like hell, David, Bobby said, shaking his head with a smirk. You need help, man. Seriously. Taking a kid? That's low. I ignored him. I looked at Frank. You want to talk? Here I am. Jessica let out a sob. David, please. Just tell us where she is. She needs her mother. She's probably terrified. She is terrified. Jessica, I said, my voice cutting through her performance. But not of me. Don't you dare blame her. Martha snapped, standing up. She is a victim here. You have dragged this family through the mud. Do you know what people are saying? Do you know the embarrassment? Is that what you care about, Martha? I asked quietly. Embarrassment? I care about my daughter. Frank shouted. And I care about the fact that you have clearly lost your mind. Paranoid delusions. Jealousy. We know about the accusations, David. Jessica told us everything. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. What did she tell you? She told us you've been imagining things, Bobby said, stepping forward. That you're obsessed with the idea that we're having an affair. That you're making up stories about Lily being hurt to punish Jess. It's sick, Dave. It's really sick. I looked at Bobby. He was confident. He thought he had won. He had the parents on his side. He had the story. I looked at Jessica. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was burying her face in Martha's shoulder. So that's the story, I said. I'm crazy. I'm paranoid. And Lily? What about Lily? Why hasn't she spoken in a year? Stress. Jessica cried out, muffled by the fabric of her mother's blouse. Because she feels the tension in the house. Because of you. I nodded slowly. I placed my laptop on a coffee table. I opened it. What are you doing? Frank demanded. Put that away. We are not here to look at your spreadsheets. We are here to look at the truth, Frank, I said. You raised your daughter to be honest, didn't you? You value integrity, don't you, Colonel? Frank narrowed his eyes. Watch your tone, son. I connected the speaker. The little chime of the Bluetooth connection sounded loud in the silent room. You say I'm imagining things, I said, addressing the room. You say I'm making up stories about abuse, about the pantry, about the threats. I'm not listening to this. Jessica stood up, panic flaring in her eyes. Dad, make him leave. He's doing it again. Sit down, Jessica, I commanded. The authority in my voice surprised even me. It wasn't a shout. It was the absolute certainty of a man holding the detonator. She froze. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was the recording from the kitchen 3 months prior. Don't worry about him, babe. He's clueless. Bobby's voice filled the room. Distinct. Undeniable. Frank's head snapped toward Bobby. Bobby stiffened, his smile vanishing. I know, but he's been asking why the savings account is dipping. Jessica's voice. We need to be careful. Martha gasped. She looked at her daughter. Jessica was pale, her hands trembling. Careful is boring. Just tell him the contractor needed a deposit. I'll let it play. I watched their faces. I watched the realization wash over Frank like a cold tide. I watched Martha's indignation turn to confusion and then to horror. Then came the part about Lily. Where's the brat? In the closet. I gave her the iPad, but I took the charger. She'll be quiet. I told her the policeman is coming for dinner. Laughter. Cruel, shared laughter. She's damaged goods, Bobby. Maybe we can send her to a boarding school. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. You could hear the settling of the house, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Frank was staring at the floor. His face was a mask of gray stone. Martha had pulled away from Jessica, moving to the far end of the sofa, as if her daughter were contagious. That's fake, Bobby whispered. His voice was cracked, desperate. He used AI. You can do that now. It's a deep fake. I looked at Frank. You know me, Frank. You've known me for 10 years. Do I know how to make deep fakes? Or do I know how to build houses? Frank stood up. He rose slowly, like a mountain rising from the sea. He turned his gaze to Bobby. It wasn't the look of a father-in-law anymore. It was the look of a colonel looking at a traitor. Get out of my house, Frank said. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. Frank, listen, it's not what it sounds like. Bobby started, raising his hands. I said get out. Frank roared. The sound was so loud it shook the glass in the cabinets. He took a step toward Bobby, his hands clenched into fists. If you're not out of my sight in 10 seconds, I will remove you myself, and I will not be gentle. Bobby looked at Jessica. Help me, he mouthed. Jessica said nothing. She was paralyzed, her web of lies dissolving around her. Bobby scrambled. He grabbed his keys and practically ran to the door. We heard the front door slam, then the roar of his truck engine as he fled. I stood there, the laptop still glowing on the table. Frank turned to Jessica. He didn't yell at her. That would have been easier. Instead, he looked at her with a profound, crushing disappointment. Is it true? He asked. Did you put my granddaughter in a closet? Did you let that man call her damaged goods? Dad, Jessica stammered, tears streaming down her face. It was just a joke. We were just blowing off steam. Martha stood up. She walked over to her daughter. Jessica looked up, expecting comfort, expecting the maternal shield to protect her, as it always had. Martha raised her hand and slapped Jessica across the face. The sound was sharp, shocking. Jessica recoiled, clutching her cheek, staring at her mother in disbelief. You are a disgrace, Martha whispered, her voice shaking with rage. You allowed a stranger to torment your child? To protect your affair? It wasn't. It wasn't torment. Jessica wailed. I have more, I interrupted. I have recordings of him threatening her. I have drawings Lily made of the black shadows in the pantry. I have bank records showing you stole $80,000 of our savings to buy him watches and hotels. I pulled the papers from my bag and tossed them onto the coffee table. They landed with a heavy slap. Frank picked up the bank statements. He scanned them. He saw the dates. He saw the amounts. He looked at me. David. Yes, Frank. Take your things, he said. Do what you have to do. He turned his back on his daughter. He walked to the window and stared out into the dark night. But Dad, Jessica pleaded. He took Lily. He's going to take everything. You lost the right to that child the moment you chose him over her safety, Frank said without turning around. I packed up my laptop. I disconnected the speaker. I felt a strange sense of hollowness. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy. I had just nuked my family to save my daughter. I walked to the door. "David," Martha said. Her voice was broken. I stopped. "Please, tell Lily. Tell her Grandma loves her." "I will, Martha." I walked out of the house. The night air felt cleaner now. The weight on my chest was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. I walked to my car, passing Jessica's SUV. I saw her purse on the passenger seat. I saw the life she had built, the car seats, the coffee cups, the illusions. I got in my car and drove away. My phone buzzed again. It was Vance. "David, good news. The judge signed a temporary protective order. Jessica and Robert are served. If they come near Lily, they go to jail. But prepare yourself. The divorce filing is public now. The press might pick it up. Let them," I texted back. "I have nothing to hide anymore." I drove back to the hotel, but I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the parking lot, watching the lights of the city. I thought about the next steps. The legal battle would be long. Jessica would fight. She had nothing left to lose, and that made her dangerous. She would play the victim card until the very end. She would claim the recordings were taken out of context. She would claim I was controlling. But she didn't have the one thing that mattered. She didn't have the truth. And she didn't have Lily. I went up to the room. Sarah was asleep in the chair, a book open on her lap. Lily was still sleeping, her breathing soft and rhythmic. I sat on the edge of the bed and brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face. She stirred, opening her eyes. "Daddy?" She murmured sleepily. "I'm here, Bug. Did the bad man go away?" "Yes, baby," I whispered. "The bad man is gone, and he's never coming back." She closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise. I was an architect who had just demolished his own masterpiece. But as the sun crested over the Cascades, illuminating the wreckage, I realized something. The foundation was still there. It was cracked, it was scarred, but it held. Lily was the foundation. And upon that rock, I would build something new, something bulletproof. The social fallout would be brutal. The whispers in the grocery store, the parents at school looking at us sideways. Jessica would spin her web of lies to anyone who would listen. Bobby would try to sue, try to claw back some shred of dignity. But I had the blueprints now. I knew where the load-bearing walls were, and I knew exactly how to bring the rest of their house down on their heads. The siege was over. The occupation was beginning, and I was ready for the long winter. Dust settles differently depending on what you have destroyed. Construction dust is gritty, heavy, a byproduct of creation that can be swept away to reveal something new. The dust of a demolished life is finer, more insidious. It coats the inside of your lungs, making every breath a conscious effort. It had been 3 months since I walked out of my house with Lily in a duffel bag, 3 months of living in the guest room of my sister's house, 3 months of legal warfare that felt less like a battle and more like a slow, suffocating siege. The King County Courthouse is a building designed to impose order on chaos. It is a structure of heavy stone and echoing corridors, a place where the messy, bleeding edges of human relationships are trimmed back with the cold scalpel of the law. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, adjusting my tie. It was a new tie. I had thrown away the old ones, the ones Jessica had bought me. I was rebuilding my wardrobe, just as I was rebuilding my life, one thread at a time. Arthur Vance sat next to me, scrolling through his tablet with the relaxed demeanor of a man who knows the outcome of the game before the first pitch is thrown. He didn't look at me. He didn't offer platitudes. That was why I liked him. "She's here," Vance murmured, not looking up. I turned my head. Down the long, marble hallway, Jessica was walking toward us. She was alone. That was the first thing that struck me. For 10 years, Jessica had never been alone. She always had an entourage, friends, her mother, Bobby. Now, she walked in solitude, her heels clicking a hollow rhythm on the floor. She looked thinner. The vibrant, perfectly put-together woman who hosted dinner parties was gone. In her place was someone fraying at the edges. Her suit was a little too large, her hair pulled back severely, exposing the sharp angles of her face. She saw me. Her step faltered for a fraction of a second. Then she steeled herself. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked desperate. It was the look of a gambler who has put their last chip on the table and knows the wheel is rigged. "David," she said as she approached. She stopped 5 feet away. The restraining order mandated 500 feet, but the courthouse hallway was a demilitarized zone. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. I looked for the woman I had loved, but I couldn't find her. She was buried under layers of deceit and the audio recordings that played on a loop in my nightmares. "Can we just talk?" she whispered. "Before we go in there? Please." For Lily. Vance stood up. He was a small man, but he blocked her path like a concrete bollard. "Mrs. Miller, you have counsel. If you wish to communicate with my client, you do so through them. Or you can speak to the judge. Those are your options." Jessica ignored him. Her eyes were locked on mine, pleading. "David, they're going to take her away from me. Completely. You can't let them do that. I'm her mother. You were her mother when you watched a man lock her in a pantry," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the rage that had consumed me weeks ago. Now, there was only a flat, factual recounting of events. "You were her mother when you told her I would die if she spoke. You abdicated that title, Jessica." Her face crumpled. "I made a mistake. I was scared. Bobby, you manipulated me." Vance checked his watch. "Save it for the stand, Mrs. Miller." The heavy oak doors opened. The bailiff stepped out. "All rise." We walked into the courtroom. It smelled of floor wax and old paper. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. Jessica sat at the defense table with a court-appointed lawyer who looked overworked and tired. Her parents weren't there. Frank kept his word. After the audio recording, he had cut her off. No money for high-priced defense. No emotional support. She was facing the consequences of her actions in a vacuum. The hearing was for permanent custody and the finalization of the divorce. Usually these things dragged on for years. But I had the accelerator. I had the evidence. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for zero tolerance for nonsense. She shuffled the papers on her bench, the sound amplified by the microphone. "We are here in a matter of Miller versus Miller," she said, looking over her glasses. "I have reviewed the emergency motions, the forensic psychologist's report, and the financial affidavits." Jessica's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client requests a continuance. She claims that the evidence presented against her, specifically the audio recordings, was obtained illegally and has been taken out of context. She asserts that she is a victim of domestic coercion by a third party, Mr. Stevens, and requests time to undergo therapy to prove her fitness as a mother." The judge didn't blink. "Mr. Vance?" Vance stood up slowly. "Your Honor, the audio recordings were captured by a home security system installed by my client in his own residence. Washington is a two-party consent state for recording, yes, but there is a distinct exception for the recording of a crime or the protection of a minor in a dwelling. Furthermore, the context is quite clear. We are not relying solely on the audio. We are relying on the testimony of Dr. Aris, the child psychologist, who has spent the last 8 weeks treating the minor child." The judge nodded. "I have Dr. Aris's report here. It makes for very difficult reading." Jessica sobbed quietly at her table. It was a practice sound, soft enough to be sympathetic, loud enough to be heard. The judge looked at her. "Mrs. Miller, compose yourself. This is a court of law, not a theater." Jessica choked back the sob, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I would like to hear from the petitioner," the judge said, looking at me. "Mr. Miller, take the stand." I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down and looked out at the empty gallery. "Mr. Miller," the judge asked directly, bypassing the lawyers, "why are you seeking sole legal and physical custody?" "Because my daughter was silenced," I said. I folded my hands on the railing. For a year, I thought she was sick. I thought she had a neurological condition. I spent thousands of dollars on doctors. I lost sleep. I blamed myself. And all that time, the person who was supposed to protect her was facilitating her abuse. I took a breath. "She stopped speaking to save my life, Your Honor. She was told that her voice would kill me. That is a level of psychological cruelty I cannot comprehend. I'm not seeking custody to punish my wife. I am seeking custody because I'm the only environment in which my daughter can breathe. Jessica's lawyer tried to cross-examine me. He tried to paint me as a workaholic, an absentee father who drove his wife into the arms of another man. Mr. Miller, isn't it true you worked 60 hours a week? Yes, to pay for the house my wife wanted. Isn't it true you were often emotionally distant? I was tired, but I was never cruel, and I never locked my child in a closet. The lawyer faltered. He had nothing. The facts were a fortress I had built around myself, and he didn't have the artillery to breach it. Then it was Jessica's turn. She took the stand. She tried to charm the judge. She spoke about her loneliness, about how Bobby Stevens had preyed on her vulnerability. She tried to throw him under the bus, reversing the car and running him over repeatedly. He scared me, she said, tears flowing freely now. He said he would hurt David if I didn't do what he wanted. I was a hostage in my own home. The judge picked up a piece of paper. Mrs. Miller, I have a transcript here of a conversation dated November 12th. In it, you are laughing. You refer to your daughter as damaged goods. You discuss using your husband's bonus check for a vacation with Mr. Stevens. You do not sound like a hostage. You sound like a co-conspirator. Jessica froze. The narrative she had constructed, the one where she was the damsel in distress, shattered against the hard surface of the evidence. I was pretending, she stammered. To appease him, the judge took off her glasses. I have been on this bench for 20 years, Mrs. Miller. I have heard every excuse in the book, but I have rarely seen a mother sacrifice her child's mental health for a lover's amusement with such callousness. The gavel didn't bang. It just rested there, heavy and final. The ruling was swift. Sole legal and physical custody to David Miller. Jessica was granted supervised visitation for 1 hour, twice a month, at a state facility, pending the completion of a 2-year intensive psychiatric evaluation and parenting course. She was ordered to vacate the marital home immediately so it could be sold. Half of the proceeds would go into a trust for Lily, which I would control. Jessica didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just slumped in her chair, deflated. As the bailiff escorted us out, she looked at me one last time. David, she whispered, what happens to me? I don't know, Jessica, I said honestly. But you have your voice. Use it to find a job. I walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining. It was a rare, bright Seattle day. The air tasted sweet. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. It's over. We won. But the war wasn't just about Jessica. There was the other front. Bobby Stevens didn't get a day in court. He got a plea deal. My lawyer, Vance, had worked in tandem with the district attorney. The fraud charges regarding the misuse of client data were federal. The child endangerment charges were state. Bobby was facing a war on 2 fronts, and he had no ammunition. He had lost his job, his reputation, and his liquidity. I heard the news a week later. Bobby had pleaded no contest to harassment and attempted fraud. He avoided jail time by agreeing to a 5-year probation, mandatory anger management, and a restitution payment that would garnish his wages for the next decade. But the real punishment wasn't the law. It was the social excommunication. I saw him once about a month after the trial. I was at a hardware store, picking up supplies for the new house. He was loading bags of mulch into a rusted sedan. He wasn't driving his big truck anymore. He looked bloated, his face red and puffy. He saw me across the parking lot. He stopped. For a moment, I saw the old flare of arrogance, the instinct to puff out his chest. But then he looked at my car, a new SUV, and he looked at his own hands, dirty from the mulch. He looked away. He got in his car and drove off. He was a ghost, a bad memory that was fading with every passing day. The hardest part of the demolition was over. Now came the architecture. I bought a house. Not a statement house like the last one. I didn't want a colonial with pillars and a grand foyer. I bought a mid-century modern ranch in a quiet neighborhood near the Sound. It needed work. The roof leaked, the floors were scratched, and the garden was overgrown. It was perfect. Lily and I moved in on a Tuesday. The house smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. We didn't bring much from the old life. We bought new furniture. We bought new dishes. We were creating a new ecosystem. The first night in the new house, Lily was anxious. Transitions were hard for her. She walked around the empty rooms, trailing her hand along the walls. "Is he here?" she asked, her voice small. "No," I said, kneeling down to her level. I checked. I checked the closets, the attic, and the basement. "There are no bad men here. Just us. And the spiders. But we can handle spiders." She giggled. It was a rusty sound, but it was there. Dr. Aris had told me that healing wouldn't be a straight line. There would be setbacks. There would be nightmares. But the key was agency. Lily needed to feel like she controlled her environment. So, I gave her a job. "You are the vice president of design," I told her, handing her a paint deck. "You choose the color for your room. Any color. Even if it's neon green." She took the deck seriously. She spent 3 days deliberating. Finally, she chose a soft, oceanic teal. "Not pink." I asked. "Pink is for babies," she said firmly. "Teal is for explorers." We painted the room together. We got paint in our hair. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel the crushing weight of the secret. I felt tired, yes, but it was the good tired of physical labor. One evening, about 6 months later, I was in the kitchen fixing a faucet. The house was coming together. The garden was cleared, and we had planted hydrangeas, not the manicured ones Jessica liked, but wild, colorful ones. The phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, Martha. I hadn't spoken to her since the night at her house. "David," she said. Her voice was brittle. "Hello, Martha. I wanted to ask, can I see her? Just for a few minutes. I have a birthday gift." I put down the wrench. I leaned against the counter. Martha had stood by while her daughter disintegrated my family. She had slapped Jessica, yes, but she had also enabled the culture of perfection that created her. "She's doing well, Martha. She's in school. She has friends. Please, David. She's my granddaughter." I looked out the window. Lily was in the backyard. She was building a fort out of cardboard boxes. She was shouting orders to an imaginary army. Her voice was loud, clear, and commanding. "She's not ready, Martha," I said gently. "And neither are you. Maybe in a year. Maybe 2. But not now. We are still curing the concrete." I hung up. It was harsh, perhaps. But load-bearing walls need time to set. You can't put weight on them too early. I walked outside. The evening sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the grass. Lily saw me and ran over. She was covered in dirt. She looked wild and free. "Daddy, come see. I built a castle." I walked over to the collection of boxes. It was a chaotic mess of tape and cardboard. "It's magnificent," I said. "Is it safe?" "Yes," she yelled. "It has a moat and a dragon, and the dragon eats bad guys." I smiled. "A dragon is good security." "Daddy?" "Yes, Bug." She stopped jumping. She looked at me with those serious, dark eyes. Why did Mama do it? The question I had been dreading. I sat down on the grass. I pulled her onto my lap. She was getting heavy. She was growing so fast. Mama was sick, Lily. Not like a flu. She had a sickness in her heart that made her selfish. She forgot how to be a mama because she wanted to be something else. And that made her make very bad choices. Does she hate me? No. I smoothed her hair. She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't know how to love someone more than she loves herself. And that is very sad for her. But it's not your fault. You're the most lovable thing in the universe. Lily thought about this. She picked a blade of grass and twirled it. "I miss her sometimes," she whispered. "But I don't miss the quiet." I hugged her tight. "You never have to be quiet again, Lily. You can scream. You can sing. You can tell me when you're mad. You can tell me when you're sad. This house has no secrets." She nodded. Then she jumped up. "Daddy, you have to be the dragon." I stood up and roared. It was a loud, silly sound. Lily shrieked with laughter and ran toward her cardboard fortress. I chased her, my legs heavy, my back aching, but my heart lighter than air. We ran until the sun went down. We ran until the stars came out. Later that night, after I tucked her in, I went to my study. I had started my own firm. Small projects, custom homes, honest materials, no veneers. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. And it was the sketchbook, the black crayon drawings of the pantry. I hadn't looked at them in months. I took the book out. I walked to the fireplace in the living room. I struck a match. I watched the flames curl around the paper. I watched the black shadows turn to gray ash. I watched the cage burn. It wasn't erasing the past. The past is the foundation. You can't remove it without bringing down the house. But you can build over it. You can lay new flooring. You can put up new drywall. I watched until the last page was gone. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of the tomb. It was the silence of peace. The silence of a child sleeping without fear. The silence of a father who has done his job. I walked to the window and looked at my reflection. I looked older. There were gray hairs on my temples. There were lines around my eyes. I touched the glass. "You did it," I whispered to the man in the reflection. "You held the roof up." I turned off the light and went upstairs. I stopped at Lily's door as I did every night. I listened. She was talking in her sleep, mumbling something about dragons and pancakes. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The renovation was complete. The structure was sound. And for the first time in a long time, I was home.